Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So let me begin with a little recap from what we did the last time, because we'll need a little bit of continuity in this session. We're going to continue the same on the same idea. So the statement, the first statement that we read was, Quran is a book which emphasizes deed rather than idea. What we discussed about it, first of all, was that it is a statement of priority, a comparative priority, that Quran stresses and concerns itself more with deed than it does with idea. Then we defined these terms very briefly. Deed, we had reason to believe, was a contact or an exposure by way of an outward activity. So this is quite a broad definition. Of course, we can qualify it further. We can, for example, add purposefulness to it. We can say that deed is an exposure or a contact or interaction by way of a purposeful activity, or an activity that has a goal or that has a purpose to it. So, for example, if I'm just mindlessly, casually knocking on this table, it would be a deed according to the first definition, but not a deed according to the next definition, which is most usually what philosophers mean when they talk about deed. They talk about some purposeful activities. Idea, we had the reason to believe that idea is any mental activity, the intellectual pursuits. We excluded faith from idea, we knocked it out, and added it to a third category, the state. So idea included all things which are mental, like ideation, philosophization, theorization, arguments, imagination, speculation, all these things. They constitute this category that we call idea. And faith is a state which we hold on to with firmness and endurance and higher conviction than we do usual ideas. We also looked at some arguments why faith couldn't be part of the ideas. One was that if faith was, for example, a thought, then that is all that it would be. Thoughts come and go, and they do not enjoy that sort of firmness and that sort of conviction that faith does. Similarly, if faith had an essential element of reason, then it would boil down to knowledge. And we know that faith is not knowledge. Faith is not expected to provide that kind of evidence which is required of knowledge. And then, of course, it was simple enough to show that faith cannot be a deed, because we talked of some examples in which case a faith would not warrant any sort of character transformation or any particular kinds of activities. So this was the brief picture that we discussed last time. Anything missing from here? Sorry? Experience. We also discussed experience, and we just, if you remember the last time, we let it loosely hang here next to deed. Does anybody remember why we added it to this category, or at least linked it to this category, even if loosely? And if we did, why did we not include it as part of the category, or at least made one a part of the other, or just called both the same?
Because experience leads results, so they will ultimately come into the aspect of deed, some kind of an action.
Right. So experience has some kind of action.
It is basically, thought from the idea that the implementation is the experience, and what one gets.
All right. So there are two different ways in which experience is used. There is one very regular, very casual way in which we use the term every day, like I have 5 years of experience doing that. So that certainly is linked to an activity. But when we are talking about experience in terms of philosophy, then we do not mean that particular kind of a knowledge which is gained by doing something, performing some activity time and again. here we are talking about experiencing something, experiencing an exposure or contact. And that was precisely the reason why we had to put it at this end, because we said that experience also includes a kind of an exposure and a contact only by way of an input, a reception, right? So it was the difference between deed and experience was that a deed was an outward activity, while experience was an inward reception, or it had linked to it some subjectivity. And that is why we also kept it slightly separated from deed. But let me give you an example. Let's say I'm sitting in the garden and suddenly a beast jumps in front of me from somewhere. Right? I might experience from that event, I might experience fear, I might experience a surge in adrenaline, so I might experience a couple of feelings. Now that experience resulted without any activity on my part. So there was an exposure, all right, there was a contact, all right, but I didn't do anything to undergo that particular experience. So those kind of exposures and these kind of contacts or these kind of experiences, they somehow suggest that it has to be something slightly different from what deeds usually are. Indeed, I have to be actively involved in something, in doing something. But experience is not exactly that. Experience in this case does be an exposure. So let us just move it slightly away from deed for now and write down the basic element that we have there. We still have the element of exposure. We didn't have any element of activity on my part, on the subject, on the one that was undergoing that experience. Two more questions in this regard. Given the same exposure to a group of people, now let me extend the same, similar kind of example. Say there's suddenly that you all see a spider crawling on this table. Now, this is a very similar exposure to all of you. Would its experience be the same for you as well? Would everybody experience the same thing? No. It's very obvious. For some of you, particularly one who has been bit by a spider in the childhood, probably he would experience fear. Somebody might experience excitement. Somebody might experience a heightened flow of adrenaline. And somebody who has been playing with spiders like myself would probably experience playfulness even, or nostalgia. So experience, given the same kind of exposure, given the same kind of contact, experience could be different, could be very different. Another question. If I take something that is usually not considered alive, let us say if I throw a hammer on a nail, I won't say machine, I know where you take that discussion. So if I throw a hammer to a nail, and to preempt any panpsychism in the room, let me put it very clearly that hammer does not have any consciousness. Given that condition, if I throw hammer on the nail, will it be right to say that hammer experienced something? It came in contact with the nail, so it had that kind of exposure or contact, the element that we wrote here. But will it be right, will it be correct to say that hammer underwent a particular experience when it contacted that nail? No. So it means that there has to be some other element other than exposure or contact, which makes up the whole body of experience, which makes up the whole event of experience. What would that be? Experience is basically about subjectivity, a change in your state that you have, or a sort of a transient state induced by that particular exposure or contact. Right? So experience is not one thing. Experience is an event. Experience is it is a dynamic thing. It is a dynamic multitude which has a flow about it. So it flows from exposure, contact, to a state, a kind of subjectivity.
So the experience that we are talking about, that we are deriving from exposure, is part of the state, which in turn is linked with somehow with faith.
Let us say both faith and that subjectivity, which undergoes a particular experience, they belong to the same category for our purposes. So they both have something to do with the state, with our, for example, a feeling. Like faith has a feeling of trust, of a belief in something, or of something's existence, or someone's existence. This experience induces a particular kind of a feeling or a state or subjectivity, which we hold and which we experience and which we undergo. So it's very essential, because we were in the business of defining these terms to their very basic essential elements. So in terms of the essential element, faith is, experience is a subjectivity. It has a subjectivity to it at its core. So let me ask you, is that the end of experience? Or does it proceed any further from there? To? Proceeds to what?
Proceeds to faith. It adds up to your knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
The next time it may become a deed, a trigger from inside.
Sure,
As I understand
sure.
I think in psychological terms, experiences, the source of the experiences in the environment, that we can say stimuli, where the deed is that you are motivated from your inside.
So that is a very good point. Of course, all the experiences and all these states, for that matter, they affect each other. Experiences get affected by previous experiences as well. For example, like we said, that if one of you has been bitten in the childhood by a spider, your reaction, your response to seeing a spider crawling that little creepy crawly thing on the table, your reaction will be very different from a person who has been playing with the spiders. So experiences do change our state, do shape our state to have more experiences in a very specific manner. So that is true. It is called continuity. Dewey, for example, has written a lot about this. And similarly, all these different states, like we also discussed the last time, that any deed and any thought, any idea would further change your state a bit. Right? It could be the permanent state, it could be a transient state. And your state will give rise to different ideas and deeds. So all these things are connected. They are in a flow and they are a continuum. We are not really saying that they are disconnected from each other. But my question right now is more in terms of defining the full body of experience. So the full body of experience, does it stop here? Or is there more to experience after this, after having that kind of subjectivity? What ensues from that subjectivity, from that subjective appropriation, if you like, from that subjective induction of that particular exposure, is its conscious awareness, its conscious realization. So experience does not only stop at being merely a feeling, it then proceeds further to a full conscious perception, if you like, or an awareness. Right? So, for example, if I'm experiencing fear, then that experience of fear will not just be a subjective feeling lurking inside me, but it will right away dress itself up into probably some words. Probably the word fear will emerge in my mind, or even if not that word, some sort of conscious awareness of what my feelings are will surface. Right? So experience always ends, a feeling always ends at the conscious awareness, the conscious realization of that feeling. And words, I mean, this would be a digression, but let me just place a couple of comments on that. Words actually are of great importance in that manner. Words are not merely symbols. They also have this character of completion, a role of perfection to them. So, until and unless we find a word to describe our feeling, state, the subjectivity that we are experiencing, it is rather unsettling. It agitates us. It is a confusing state to be in if you're not able to give it a name. As soon as it dresses itself up with a word, it gets crystallized as well. And we are surer of what the feeling is. We know ourselves slightly better than that. So, for example, one very good technique in parenting as well is that if your child is throwing tantrums and he looks confused about something, just tell him calmly that, hey, you know what you're experiencing right now, the state that you're in? It is called nostalgia, or is it called frustration or anger? And sometimes it works like magic. Child suddenly looks at you and he just calms down. Because now he has something to hold on to. Now he knows what he's feeling. So he has, if you like, a receptacle to place his state in and put it away. Words are much more than mere symbols, but we digress. So, so this is the whole flow from here to subjectivity and awareness, from exposure to subjectivity to awareness, which is called an experience. Now another question. Is an exposure really necessary to experience something? I might be experiencing a thought. I might have a thought, a memory, and that memory or thought might fill me up with disgust or with nostalgia or with happiness or anything, or inspiration. Right? I might even be experiencing a state of happiness for no apparent reason. So this can come from any side. Subjectivity there, it remains there. I have to be in a particular state. I have to be experiencing something, means that I have subjectivity about it, a subjective induction, a feeling of something going on. That feeling might come from idea. That feeling might come from a deed, which again is through a particular exposure, or even my own state. I might experience immense elation or immense moroseness or immense nostalgia or whatever. And that is just subjectivizing further my own state. And that state goes on to that awareness or realization.
Exposure and deed and idea. Everyone turning towards the perception of awareness in the end. Why Quran emphasizes deed rather than idea? What is the point? Because in the end we are reaching to subjectivity, and from there to awareness or consciousness. What is the point of emphasizing more on deed rather than idea?
Right. That is a good question. So basically, it is about, in one way, from one perspective, it is about means and objectives. When a good deed is mentioned, it automatically includes a good idea behind it. It automatically includes a good state behind it. Without having a good state, without having good intentions, you cannot perform a good deed. Right? Just having a good belief system, a very elaborate knowledge about the nitty-gritty details of, for example, theology or fiqh, does that warrant a good character as well? So that is where the difference lies. That is one perspective. There can be many different points here. And that is where we're going next, if we do not have any further question on this particular model. Right. So, onwards to the validity of this statement. We said that after understanding what Iqbal is trying to say here, which is that Quran emphasizes more on deeds, purposeful activities, than it does on the belief systems or philosophizations or ideations, all those things, right? Which does not include faith, of course. So we have had an elaboration look at that, why faith could not be part of it. So having understood that statement, now the next step is to establish whether this statement really actually aligns with Quran or not. So I will start with a disclaimer. Right? As we mentioned the last time as well, Quran does concern itself with ideas too. So it's not to say that it simply neglects ideas. So while reading Quran, we come across lots of expressions about ideas and about intellect and about thoughtfulness and reflection and contemplation. There are directives like ثُمَّ تَتَفَكَّرُوا, so ponder, so reflect. إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لِآيَاتٍ لِقَوْمٍ يَتَفَكَّرُونَ لِقَوْمٍ يَعْقِلُونَ لِأُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ. So all these different verses which talk about the importance or which at least stress on or exhort to the intellectual pursuits and reasoning and pondering and contemplation. And then there are these verses which, for example, which you were probably trying to point to when you said God. I just did not want to put God as such in the category of idea, but you were very right, for example, about the verses such as Allahu Nur as-Samawati wal Ard. So the verses which talk about the higher order of realities, about angels, about the genesis of the universe, about the attributes of God. The last verses of Surah Al-Hashr. هو الله الذي لا إله إلا هو عالم الغيب والشهادة هو الرحمن الرحيم, till the very end of the surah. And then there are also verses about the reasoning. For example, هاتوا برهانكم إن كنتم صادقين. Bring a reason if you are truthful. So having said that, there is one criteria to see where the real emphasis is. When Quran talks about the ultimate success, when Quran talks about the ultimate objective of life, when it's talking in terms of the larger purpose of life and the criteria for success, let us see how much it focuses on the acts of contemplation then. So there are verses like, I'm reading from Surah Al-Shu'ara, for example, very, very famous verse, verses 88 and 89. إِلَّا مَنْ أَفَى اللَّهَ بِقَلْبٍ سَلِيمٍ. The day when nothing will benefit except for that person who brings to Allah qalbin salim, the sound heart. Right? What is heart? It is the basic element of our fundamental self. That is what everything boils down to. This state. That is what deeds and idea both boil down to. That is from where they both proceed. If you have a good state, you will have good ideas and good deeds. The kind of state you have would give rise to those kind of ideas. So state is fundamental, from which emanates both deeds and ideas. And on the Judgment Day, when Quran is specifically talking about the Judgment Day, that is what everything's going to collapse in. So what matters is what you are, what product you have become on the Day of Judgment. Not how much you know about particular faith, how much detail you know about a particular fiqh. So that has its own role about these things, definitely. That might help you and aid you in acquiring a particular state. But at the end of the day, it is all about the state that you bring to Allah. So this is the matter of the Judgment Day. But when Quran talks about this particular life, this pathway, this course by which we come to that particular product that we are on the Judgment Day, it talks about two things. It talks about faith, iman, and deeds. So for example, there are verses like, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ لَهُمْ جَنَّاتُ النَّعِيمِ. Those people who had faith and who did salih deeds, for them are the blissful gardens, for them are the blissful paradise. It's the ultimate symbol of success. So by the way, what does salih deed mean? Another digression, I know, but just that we stumble upon this word.
Virtuous deeds.
Deeds in good faith.
Deeds in good faith, yes. So ultimately that is the intentions and the objectives, probably those are going to be criteria. Salih deeds are those which strive to restore the order in things, which strive for an ideal state, let us say. So in any environment that you go in, wherever you go, whoever you meet, whatever you touch, if you are improving that thing, if you are changing that thing for a good cause, if you are inspiring a person to be an even better person than before, whoever you're meeting, if you are improving your environment wherever you are, these are all salih deeds. And there are other perspectives on this as well, of course. So, similarly, Surah Al-Asr, that is the ultimate summary of what is the criteria for avoiding the loss. وَالْعَصْرِ إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ. So, without a doubt, human is in loss. إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. So, except for those people, again, who had faith, so this thing, and who did salih deeds. And then the next two parts of the criteria, obviously, if we think about it, they're also about deeds. So you're not only doing good deeds yourself, but also you're also inspiring and motivating and exhorting and appealing others to this similar kind of a state and deeds, to their rightfulness. And also with sabr and perseverance and determination on that path, because this path is going to have a fair share of troubles and difficulties. So the focus when Quran is talking about the larger objectives of life is not on the belief system as such, but it is about the good deeds. Obviously, if you have a good belief system, that is going to help somehow in good deeds as well. But there is a point where it does not matter really the kind of petty conflicts in which we so readily engage ourselves in every day about fiqh and about the theological school of thought, about the creeds. Those are hardly ever found in Quran when it's talking about the larger scheme and larger concepts. Similarly, there is another term used in Quran very often, very frequently, related to, again, these themes about the larger objectives of life, which is taqwa. So it talks about وَاتَقُوا لَعَلَّكُمْ تُفْلِحُونَ. So taqwa in its every definition is either about a particular state, a state of mindfulness, a state of prudence, or it's about a particular mode of action, a mode of deeds related to that particular state. So وَاتَقُوا لَعَلَّكُمْ تُفْلِحُونَ. Be mindful, be fearful of Allah, so that you can be successful. Success, the ultimate success. Quran mainly uses two terms for this, falah or fawz. So it can be a very good exercise to find different verses which are using these two terms, which are talking about success in any other manner, and see what criteria Quran is putting across and what ideas Quran is talking about in those particular verses. One last thing that I'd like to look into is those verses which actually make idea their subject, which talk about fikr. What are they exactly talking about? What kind of ideas are they actually addressing? So some of those, for example, Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 219, from which I quoted earlier, which ends at لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَفَكَّرُونَ. It's talking about contemplation and reflection. So this is the word that actually addresses a question, an inquiry from people regarding charity. People asked, of what or how much should we spend from in charity, in donations? And this is the famous verse which said, all the surplus that you have, all that is left after your basic needs are met, that constitutes the pool, that is the candidate lot from where you have to spend the charity. And similarly, this verse also talks about drinking, and it also talks about betting. And the way that it talks about them is that drinking and betting, they have some benefits in them as well, but they harm grossly, their ill effects grossly outweigh any benefits that you can have from them. So this verse is not really passing any particular direct judgments. It's not about directives. It is giving you very clear choices. It is making things very clear for you. And that is what it says, that this is how Allah makes His signs and His verses clear for you, His ayat clear for you. And so that, لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَفَكَّرُونَ, you can reflect. Reflect into what? Reflect and weigh this life with the hereafter and decide your position between them. Decide where you want to invest yourself most. So you have all these different choices made very clear in front of you, and you have to position yourself between them wherever you want to. So contemplate and decide where you want to position yourself. It is your judgment. Right? So basically, it turns out that this particular verse that was talking about ideas is also mainly about deeds. It's also about the charity and donations and how you want to decide what you want to do and what state you want to acquire at the end of the day. So similarly, there are verses like إِنَّ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَاخْتِلَافِ اللَّيْلِ وَالنَّهَارِ لَآيَاتٍ لِأُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ. So there are signs in the creation of the skies and the earth and the interchange of nights and days for people of understanding. So this particular verse is in a way motivating and inspiring you to engage with the environment in different ways. There are signs for you. Look around. Engage with your environment and engage with the universe. It is more about, it seems, more about the empirical contact and exposure to the universe rather than pure ideas. And then it continues, الَّذِينَ يَذْكُرُونَ اللَّهَ قِيَامًا وَقُعُودًا وَعَلَى جُنُوبِهِمْ وَيَتَفَكَّرُونَ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ رَبَّنَا مَا خَلَقْتَ هَذَا بَاطِلًا سُبْحَانَكَ فَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ. Those people who standing and sitting and on this side, they remember Allah and contemplate into the creation of the earth and sky. And what does that contemplation lead them to? An inspiration. It ascends their faith to higher planes of inspiration, and they call out of that inspiration that, oh Allah, this cannot be all in vain. This cannot be without a purpose. This cannot be without worthy end. So again, this contemplation is mainly about the state. It's about faith. It's not about a belief system. So this is not to say that there are not verses about the belief system. There are verses which can be argued that they are more targeted, more focused on the ideas rather than faith or deed or other empirical exposure to the universe or experiences. And it might be another good exercise. So you guys might want to, if you're interested, or all those who are interested, you might want to divide yourselves into two groups. One can go through all the verses about the success, the ultimate success in this life and the hereafter. And the other group can probably try to find these verses which are talking about contemplation and thought process and reasoning for the sake of ideas more than for the sake of these other three things. And you'll be surprised to see how those things which concern us the most nowadays to a large population of Muslims, the elaborate, detailed theological systems and the very elaborate details of fiqh, which are of importance, but which lead us to engage in huge conflicts, they are not really the highest priority in Quran, which in turn and instead puts the highest value on character and attitude. In words of Iqbal, once again, the ultimate goal of ego is to be something, not to see something. So this kind of shows very clearly that this particular statement with which Iqbal starts his book is well in line with the priorities of the Quran. And it is very well corroborated by all the different verses that we saw. Now, the last question remains about the statement why Iqbal started his book on ideas with such a statement which undermines ideas outright. Very simple answer. It is an acknowledgement. So he is acknowledging right in the start that, okay, I know what the actual regular general priorities are in Islam and in Quran, and those are certainly not this kind of philosophization and the development of ideas that I'm going to do in the rest of the book. But, and he starts from the next statement, to lay out the reasons which have made this sort of task a rather urgent task in today's times and circumstances. So that we will take a look at next time, the next statement and the rest of the preface. Hopefully, maybe we won't be able to complete the whole preface, but still we will work our way significantly into it. Any questions?